Hello again, it's Aaron from Transformed by His Truth. I'm doing one more video um, with an article written by uh, Fox News and a video to go along with it. It's called Netanyahu Response to Strike That Killed Hamas Terror Leaders, Civilians Investigating the Incident. Jerusalem. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his nation's military on Monday flatly refuted claims that the country's Air Force aimed to harm civilians in its strike that eliminated two senior Hamas terrorist leaders on Sunday, the same day Hamas launched its most recent barrage of missiles into densely populated areas of Israel. Interesting, you don't hear anything about that, and that's because of the Iron Dome system. But if there was no Iron Dome system, Israel would have been destroyed a long time ago by all the missiles and rockets and drones that these terrorists shoot into Israel or shoot into Jerusalem. There are mixed reports about the number of civilians killed in the Rafah strike. The Hamas-run health ministry claimed at least 45 people died, and other outlets have quoted up to 50 deaths. Again, you have to wonder, because it's a Hamas-run health ministry, if that's not an inflated number. According to Reuters, in a speech to the Israeli parliament on Monday, Netanyahu said, "In Rafah, we already evacuated about 1 million non-combatant residents, and despite our utmost effort not to harm non-combatants, something unfortunately went tragically wrong. We are investigating the incident and will reach conclusions because this is our policy." Look at the policy that Israel has. They care about non-terrorist civilians. Nobody does that in war. I don't care who you are. You don't worry about civilians losing their lives. You go in and you go after and attack the terrorists or the bad guys, and you get rid of them. And unfortunately, civilian casualties are a part of war. It's an acceptable loss, which is sad but true. So you got to give Israel credit for giving these people warnings and providing shelter, food, water, and medicine for them to escape to. A statement released by a spokesman for the Biden administration's National Security Council on Monday said the devastating images following an IDF strike in Rafah last night that killed dozens of innocent Palestinians are heartbreaking. Yes, it is, but it's, again, Israel gave them plenty of time to get out. The statement continued, Israel has a right to go after Hamas, and we understand this strike killed two senior Hamas terrorists who are responsible for attacks against Israeli civilians. But as we've been clear, Israel must take every precaution, which they do, possible to protect civilians. We are actively engaging the IDF and partners on the ground to assess what happened and understand that the IDF is conducting an investigation. Hamas does not differentiate between civilians and terrorists. Fox News Digital reported in March that an Ivy League statistician argued that Hamas death toll numbers are not trustworthy. Before the strike, a number of steps were taken to reduce the risk of harming uninvolved civilians during the strike, including conducting aerial surveillance, the deployment of precise munitions by the IAF, and additional intelligence information. Based on these measures, it was assessed that there would be no expected harm to uninvolved civilians, said the Israeli Defense Forces IDF statement, which added, in addition, the strike did not occur in the humanitarian area in Al-Mawasi, to which the IDF has encouraged civilians to evacuate. The IDF statement continued, the incident is under investigation of the General Staff's Fact-Finding and Assessment Mechanism, which is an independent body responsible for examining exceptional incidents in combat. The General Staff's Fact-Finding and Assessment Mechanism is investigating the circumstances of the deaths of civilians in the area of the strike. The IDF regrets any harm to uninvolved civilians during combat. Whoever apologizes for uninvolved civilians being killed in other wars? Nobody. The military advocate general, Major General Yefat Tomer Yerushalmi, directed the General Staff's fact-finding and assessment mechanism to investigate the strike carried out in Rafah, noted the IDF statement. Hamas said in a statement that the terrorist organization sought to hit Israel's Mediterranean metropolis. We fired a large salvo at Tel Aviv in response to the Zionist massacres of civilians. They would shoot anyway. They don't need any reason to do it. They hate Israel and the people of Israel. The EU and the U.S. designated terrorist movement, Hamas, has for over a decade launched rockets at civilians in Israel, triggering a series of mini wars with the Jewish state. According to the IDF, yesterday IAF aircraft conducted an intelligence-based strike in the area of Rafah against significant terror targets, including senior terrorists in Hamas's Judea and Samaria wing, who directed terror attacks in Judea and Samaria and carried out murderous attacks against Israeli civilians. The IDF added the strike was carried out based on prior intelligence information regarding the presence of the senior Hamas terrorists at the site of the strike. The two Hamas leaders killed were Yassin Rabia, the commander of Hamas's leadership in Judea and Samaria, the biblical name for the West Bank, and Khaled Nagar, a senior official in Hamas who oversaw the Judea and Samaria wing. The IDF statement, with a possible view toward alleged Hamas propaganda, also said, claims that the strike was conducted using 7 munitions weighing a ton are false. The strike was conducted using 2 munitions with a reduced warhead aimed specifically for a strike of these type of targets. To Winsland, the UN Special Coordinator of the Middle East Peace Process, or Tor Winsland, the UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, condemned the strike in a statement issued Monday. Of course he did. I condemned last night's Israeli strikes which hit tents for displaced people in the southern Gaza city of Rafah and has tragically led to the reported loss of more than 35 Palestinian lives, including women and children, and dozens of injuries, and we don't know if that's true. He continued, while the IDF said it struck a Hamas installation and killed 2 senior Hamas militants in the strikes, I am deeply troubled by the deaths of so many women and children in an area where people have sought shelter. They were told to get out and seek shelter other places. IDF spokesman Peter Lerner took to X to debunk a Hamas source who appeared in media reports to inflate the number of casualties and claimed the strike unfolded in the humanitarian area. Lerner wrote, Mohammed Abu Hani quoted is a Hamas official. He appears to be the source of the widely reported claim that the IAF targeted the humanitarian zone. Is he the only source of the reports from the same civil defense of 50 people killed in the strike? A number published by many of the world media. Fact, the strike never took place in the designated humanitarian zone. That's the end of the article. I'm going to play this quick video here. It's 4 minutes and 24 seconds so that you can get an idea of what would happen if Hamas would agree to the normal ceasefire, not one that gives them back everything they want, but one that's fair to the side of Israel. And the Palestinian side should feel lucky that they're even being considered for a ceasefire, considering it's run by terrorists. Anyway, let's listen to this.
In Gaza, let's bring in Dr. Rebecca Grant. She's a senior fellow at the Lexington Institute and a national security analyst. Dr. Grant, thank you for joining us this morning. I want to get your sense of what's happened in Gaza, in Israel, over the last 24, 36 hours.
Well, my first reaction is that if Hamas would accept a ceasefire, none of this would have happened. Instead, what took place was that Hamas, trying to show they still can operate in Gaza, launched a relatively small attack, but worrying because it came from multiple locations. Israel was right to go ahead and target those 2 Hamas operatives. That was a legitimate military target. Unfortunately, it led to the fire that you see. And again, if Hamas would accept the ceasefire that Egypt and Qatar and the U.S. and Israel and so many others want them to accept, we wouldn't see any of this going on. But hey, it's time for Biden and Israel to find a way to wrap up this military operation quickly and decisively restore Israel's security.
And the Biden administration is applying that pressure. There's also pressure with the international community and within the Israeli government. You've got Benny Gantz, who's part of the coalition there, or part of the war council there. He's threatening to walk unless Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu comes up with what he calls a credible plan for the after-war piece of all of this. Where is Israel on that? And is there a credible plan for what comes next in Gaza?
Well, one piece of that plan is already in operation, and that is that Army pier in Gaza. Israel is manning the land side of that, bringing in trucks of humanitarian relief. So that piece is there, but there was such an expectation, Rich, that this ceasefire would come to pass, and then it would be about getting some hostages back, starting humanitarian relief, and trying to move on to a permanent settlement. Instead, we see this activity, and even though the IDF has actually moved one of its 5 units back from the Rafah area, the fact is, bottom line, Hamas only reacts to military pressure. And so Israel will keep that pressure on no matter what the International Court for Justice has to say about it. And even in the face of these very odd warrants requested by the ICC.
Yeah, you mentioned the ICC here. That's the International Criminal Court. It has moved forward warrants against the defense minister, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, also for some Hamas officials. Here's what Congressman Jared Moskowitz had to say about that.
This is totally political. The ICC is irrelevant. They have no jurisdiction. We might as well call them the Harry Potter Ministry of Magic. They're irrelevant because Israel's not a party to their treaty. And so this is pressure, unfortunately, from the international community that wants to see no more Israel.
So what about that pressure from the, quote, Ministry of Magic, Rebecca?
Well, the congressman is exactly right. And the ICC prosecutor Khan wants to put out warrants both for the Hamas leaders, Sinwar and al-Maziri, and for the Israeli government. So this is a non-starter. He's a bit of a publicity hound. This is the same individual who's put out a warrant for Putin, which I agree with, but it's no more likely to change the situation on the ground. And so I think the ICC, in considering weighing in, is simply making the problem more difficult. What has to happen is Hamas has to agree with Qatar and Egypt's support to a ceasefire so that we can begin to see some progress. I mean, I think everyone in the region understands that Hamas is getting very, very isolated. But Hamas, they don't agree to the Oslo Accords. They don't agree to any of this international stuff. And so it's just going to take the right blend of military pressure and that behind-the-scenes diplomatic pressure. It has got to be ceasefire. That is the only path, and it's up to Hamas when that happens.
Dr. Rebecca Grant, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Okay, so you got, different people on here talking about what's going on and how Hamas could have had a two-state solution or at least a ceasefire a long time ago, but they keep changing what they want and wanting to get back the pre-1967 borders, which are not going to happen because it includes the Golan Heights, which is a military strategic location that Israel would be foolish to give up, because you can see from the top of the Golan Heights, you can see the entire valley of Israel, and it's way too strategic militarily to give up for anything. But of course, Hamas wants that, and they want everything else they want. And so just remember, who are the bad guys here? Hamas is the elected leadership of Gaza and is not willing to have a two-state solution with Israel. They want the elimination of the Jews. They do not want to live side by side with them. So let's remember who the bad guys are here. And I'm going to leave that where it is right there. And hope that you have a good day. Thank you.